Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Bob Kitchen, Vice Chair for Advocacy for Virginia Clinicians for Climate Action. And today I'll be presenting our legislative preview and our update for our upcoming Advocacy Day next Thursday, February 6th. I'll be doing the presentation and at the end leave some time for questions. I would just say, take yourself off of mute or raise your hand if you want to ask a question. I probably will not be checking chat and we don't have a Q&A. Let me share my desktop for the deck. There we go. Like I said, this will be our preview for the General Assembly, and I'll be breaking it up into two parts, the objectives being in the first part to talk in general about the VCCA's advocacy role, legislation from the past that we are going to continue to support and ask to defend, and also new legislation for 2025, and then details about our Advocacy Day next week. Second part will be a general description of the General Assembly, the legislative process, and how to hold an effective meeting. So first, a description of VCCA and our areas of focus. We have three main pillars: education and research, community outreach, and advocacy. And our statement relative to advocacy is climate policy is health policy. Our focus is protecting Virginians from the adverse health impacts of climate change. And our clinicians provide credible, health-based perspectives on climate policy solutions to ensure that such policies are made with the health of our citizens and communities as a top priority. Now, this is a chart from a survey a couple of years ago done by the Gallup organization, in which people were asked to rate various professions on honesty and ethics. And you'll see that the top three professions are in the medical field: nurses, medical doctors, and pharmacists. Now, it's great to have this respect of the American public, but along with it becomes an obligation to speak out to protect Americans' health. And that is where our advocacy for addressing climate change comes in. So this will be our 8th annual Advocacy Day, next Thursday, February 6th, meeting at the General Assembly in Richmond. And our first Advocacy Day was back in 2018. At that time, we visited with lawmakers and just talked about health and economic benefits of clean energy, clean water, and environmental justice policy. We also spoke at various legislative committees, but never before had clinicians in their white coats walk the halls of the General Assembly to discuss climate change solutions. So this year, we're going to support previously passed legislation, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, Virginia Clean Economy Act, and Clean Car Standards. This is just a map of the states that have participated in RGGI. And the benefits that Virginia received from being in RGGI for 3 years, 2021, 2022, and 2023, was that we generated over $800 million that was distributed between low-income energy efficiency programs and community flood preparedness, around $400 million for each of these. And our 3-year participation in RGGI slashed energy sector air pollution by 22%. And these various emissions fell as well: sulfur dioxide, nitrous oxide. And then also, if Virginia had been able to continue with RGGI, we would have been able to drive down overall emissions by an additional 30% from 2020 to 2030. However, it became a politicized issue, and when the current governor took office in January 2022, he issued an executive order to withdraw Virginia from RGGI. The Air Pollution Control Board went ahead and followed up on this, and finally in July, RGGI was repealed, and we could no longer participate once The 3-year term was up at the beginning of 2024. Now, there was a suit or administrative appeal brought against this decision. It was narrowed down to one organization in Floyd County. And that decision was rendered not too long ago in November. The court there ruled that the decision to pull Virginia out of RGGI was unlawful. The argument against the decision was that this had been legislation passed by the General Assembly, and as such, it would take legislation again to remove Virginia from RGGI. Now, this is currently undergoing an appeal process, so we don't really know how long it will take for this to be resolved. Now, in the bills that we're going to be defending, certainly these are 3 of the main ones that we've supported in the past, but there are 3 anti-RGGI bills. They're all in play, and you can see from the red here where they currently stand in their different committees. None of those have made it to the floor yet for a vote, but they also haven't been killed. Fortunately, 2 bills that were anti the Clean Economy Act have been stricken down or shut down in their committee. If there are other anti-VCCA bills, I do not know those at this time, but I will keep following that. And there was a bill against clean car standards that also was shut down. So when you see something about passed by indefinitely, that means that committee is not considering it any further. Now, there is an action this year to get Virginia back in RGGI, and that has to do with budget items. So Senator Locke and Delegate Herring have submitted a budget item to require Virginia to rejoin RGGI immediately, and also to appropriate the existing revenues and future revenues to the programs it funds. That is your low energy efficiency and your coastal protections. Now, the legislation that we are going to be supporting this year, the new legislation, has to do with data centers, and we're concentrating on the health focus, extreme heat protections, what I call alternative solar siting, and the comprehensive health plans. Now, data centers have become a very major issue in the Commonwealth. Hardly a person has not heard that we have concerns about data centers, but we're going to be focusing again on the health impacts. So I'm going to talk a little bit about data centers, a little more information here about those. So the number of existing and proposed Virginia data centers is approximately 512 across the Commonwealth. Virginia is home to more than 35% of all known hyperscale data centers worldwide. Northern Virginia is the largest data center market in the world, ahead of what's in Beijing or China and London or England. And this was from the JLARC study, and I'll talk about that a little more. And the Northern Virginia data centers handle 70% of the world's internet traffic. So Northern Virginia is where it's at relative to data centers and internet, hyperscale, everything else. This map, it just shows a number of companies that are involved in data centers, and you can certainly see that the biggest concentration of those are in the Northern Virginia area. The Piedmont Environmental Council has put together a map of where data centers are located, and this just shows Northern Virginia, so you get both Fairfax, Loudoun, and some of Prince William County. The pink circles are existing data centers, and the red are proposed data centers. That's quite a cluster. But looking a little further, when you look at Loudoun County, which has been basically the, I won't say the birthplace, but pretty close to that of data centers in Virginia, it led the way in approving data centers and actually has acquired quite a bit of revenue for that, which has caused some consternation with other jurisdictions. And you can see how many existing data centers are currently in Loudoun County and a number more being proposed. If you look at Prince William County, and this is just in the Manassas area, there's a good number there and probably as many being proposed as currently exist. So our health concern has to do with air pollution and the production of electricity. So in Virginia, our electricity generation relies heavily on fossil fuels, with 54% from natural gas and a very small amount from coal. And I've identified the impact of the data centers both being an indirect impact on health as well as a direct one. The indirect is that this reliance on fossil fuels to produce electricity, and such as natural gas, which has 70 to 90% methane, they contribute to greenhouse gas emissions and air pollutants, such as sulfur dioxide, nitrous oxide, PM 2.5, etc., worsening our pollution in our air. The direct effect of a data center has to do with their backup generators. Each data center has a very large number, maybe 40 or more diesel generators, and these are big generators, not like the little unit you would have for your house. And when they fire up using diesel fuel, significant pollution is released. Now, one pushback on that is that these diesel generators aren't being used unless there were to be a serious failure of the grid. But the data centers have to run 24/7. They cannot do without the electricity. So the situation could exist where there would be a significant use of diesel generators. So there were a number of bills submitted in the 2024 General Assembly. There were actually 17 of them. They were all tabled waiting for a JLARC study. And JLARC stands for the Joint Legislative Audit and Review Commission, which is a nonpartisan group which is tasked by the General Assembly to research various subjects that legislation is being considered for. So JLARC was tasked with studying data centers, and they released their report in December of last year. And a couple of points from those, they said right now the energy demand for the state would increase from just over 10,000 gigawatt hours in 2023 to over 30,000 gigawatt hours in 2040. And I'll show you a chart in a second. To meet those demands, this would require more renewable energy and also natural gas. And they projected that a new natural gas plant would have to be built every 1.5 years to keep up with this demand that we're going to see by 2040. And this is the map. This was actually from a report done to Prince William County, showing a chart showing energy demand or energy usage starting from 2023 going through 2040. And the top line reflects that if there was unconstrained demand with the current projected growth of data centers, that this would increase by 183%. So you see it goes from just a little more than 10,000 gigawatt hours up to more than 30,000 gigawatt hours. And what they mean by unconstrained demand is that there wouldn't be anything in place that would prevent every data center that wanted to be built from becoming operational. But when you consider factors such as inadequate infrastructure, like maybe we can't generate enough electricity, or maybe there aren't enough transmission lines present, etc., they said that you might see half of this, but that would still increase by about 100% the need for energy. If there was no new data center demand over that stretch of time, the demand for energy or the need would only increase by 15%. Another part of the JLARC study had to do with the diesel generators, and they recognized that there is significant pollution. So they had one option in the JLARC study, said as a condition of receiving data center sales and use tax exemptions, which they get now, it is possible that a condition to be put on receiving this is using only Tier 4 generators, which are the cleanest generators. And this picture just shows you at one data center the number of backup diesel generators that are present. So the data center industry has a significant impact on the Virginia Clean Economy Act. And these extraordinary energy needs threaten VCCA by this first condition in their first segment of the VCCA, where it establishes a renewable portfolio standards such that all coal-fired plants would be retired by 2030. And Dominion Energy, in a recent integrated resource plan, identified that they would likely not be able to comply with this because of the needs for increased electricity supply. And also, another condition of the VCEA is that fossil fuel no longer be used to generate electricity by 2045 for Dominion and 2050 for Appalachia. And again, these are jeopardized. Now, this just shows the number of data center bills that have been proposed this year, at least those that have been captured by Virginia Conservation Network. And there were 21 of these this year. Now, when I looked at the available bills, I wanted to get some that actually helped us address our concerns. Pollution, predominantly things that had an impact on people's health. So, two bills, they are not exactly companion bills, because when you talk about a companion bill for the General Assembly, that means the wording is identical between a House bill and a Senate bill. But they have similarities. And so if they both were to pass and transfer to the other chamber, there would probably be a committee, a conference committee to work this out. But they both talk about having some amount of the electric load come from clean energy sources. This is a House bill, and it just says a percentage, and I looked at the text of the bill, and I didn't see a percentage number spelled out. But in the Senate bill, it states that 90% of the energy would be either directly from renewable sources or from certificates quantifying renewable energy. There has to be a sufficient investment in energy efficiency measures such that the power usage effectiveness score would be less than 1.2. I had to look that up. This basically, PUE is that it compares the amount of energy that goes into a data center for what is actually used for the generation of electricity. I'm sorry, to run the servers. And so if you have a higher number, it means that a lot of that electricity is going for heating and other non-server issues. Another condition is that only backup generators that meet certain emission standards, like that Tier 4. And this was interesting, that the Department of Energy identify opportunities and develop a plan for the beneficial use of waste heat from data centers. And there was a comment on one webinar that I listened to that in France or in Paris, I think the pool that was used for the swimming venue for the Olympics was heated by heat from a data center. The other issue is that noise pollution can be significant from a data center, and that is a health impact. So this is a report from a group called Tech Target. Excuse me. The data centers cause some people to experience headaches, stress, and sleep disturbance. Lack of sleep and stress can result in anxiety, cognitive impairment, and cardiovascular risk. And they also can cause tinnitus and hearing loss. And Senator Danica Rome, submitted this bill relative to noise abatement. So what's the status of our data centers, right? Data center bills? 2 of them are in committee, and these are the first ones that I described. And just this morning, about 11:30, when I was looking at the status of the bills, it looks like Senator Rome's did not get out of this committee. So I will go ahead and see if that's confirmed, and this may not be a bill that we'll be supporting. Moving on from data centers, something I call alternative solar siting. Last year, we had supported a bill for putting solar panels over parking lots. Well, there's another bill this year and another one as well that helps to put solar panels on the land that otherwise isn't going to be used. And so we definitely need more clean energy because of our electricity demands. And there's been a lot of pushback on solar arrays or solar farms because they use prime agricultural land and forest, the tune of hundreds of thousands of acres. And also there are increased transmission lines needed to connect the solar sites for obtaining their energy. So alternative solar, what I call alt-sol, means there's less removal of prime agricultural soils and forests, and the benefits are cleaner air, fewer health impacts, and don't need the long interconnections. So there are two bills, and the first has to do with solar canopies in parking areas. And Delegate Bulova put this bill out. It said any locality may include an ordinance or provision requires an applicant to install solar canopy over designated parking areas. It's currently live in this committee. And this was an interesting one from Delegate Webert, a Republican. Otherwise, we've had predominantly Democrats. And this is a grant program that will provide grants to develop real renewable energy sources, including solar, wind and geothermal, on contaminated or previously mined lands. So this goes to also help with those concerns about using farmland, forest, etc. So the next area that we're looking for, or we're supporting legislation is for extreme heat protections. And I think everybody's aware of the statistics about extreme heat due to climate change, but heat is the leading weather-related killer in the United States. 2024 was the warmest year on record. It seems like every year we're hearing that the past year was the warmest. The past 10 years are the 10 warmest years on record, and these are from the World Meteorological Organization. The fourth National Climate Assessment identifies outdoor workers as a population experiences increased climate risk due to a combination of exposure and sensitivity. And in this 10-year stretch, 986 workers across all industry sectors in the U.S. died from exposure to heat. And the 2018 National Climate Assessment said by 2090, $160 billion in lost wages will be due to the impact of extreme heat. And this also is from the World Meteorological Association, showing that these 6 agencies that collect data on temperatures are in agreement as to where we are right now. So we're above the 1.5 degrees Celsius or centigrade. So we have two groups of bills here that deal with protecting people from the heat. And the first one is from the first group are from Senator Hashmi and Delegate Hernandez. And it will ask that the Safety and Health Codes Board develop a list of high hazard industries. Those where the workers are especially prone to being affected by heat, and develop regulations requiring employers to implement standards for heat illness prevention. And this one is actually looks like it has made it out of the committee in the Senate. Actually, I correct that. It was referred to the Finance Appropriations. And the House subcommittee recommended reporting it. That means it's going to go to the floor for a vote. And we also have bills, again, Senator Hashmi, and this time from Delegate Jones, about protecting high school athletes from heat. And they both ask that the jurisdictions provide guidelines as to how to protect their athletes. So this is another group of bills relative to heat that we'll be supporting. Now, pass by for the day. I don't think that means that this bill has been stopped, but I'll continue to follow that. This one in the House has been reported, so that means it should go to the floor for a vote. Now, the other group is something called the Comprehensive Health Plan, and this is based on what's called the Dillon Rule. And I talked about this last year, and that is that a municipality, such as town, county, or city government, unless they have approval from the General Assembly, they cannot adopt an ordinance that would allow them to make decisions on a particular topic. So there are two bills, a House bill and a Senate bill, which have similarities. And one is from Delegate Simons. And this is that the locality would be able to use data and research, and in their comprehensive health plan could determine how it would impact overall public health and access to healthcare services And Senator Bagby's has to do with identifying environmental justice and fence line communities and policies to reduce health risk. So both of these have passed their respective chambers. So that's why I put the asterisk up here. As I understand it, they will be available at crossover. So the House bill is going to go to the Senate and vice versa. And since there are some differences, they will probably have to go in conference committee. But I would be encouraged that these could be passed, this piece of legislation. Okay. Now I just want to go ahead and start talking about some of the details relative to our advocacy data. And this shows that we're going to meet again at the new General Assembly building, which is located at 201 North 9th Street, right here. Even though it says that's its address, we found last year that the entrance to the General Assembly building was on Broad Street. So just FYI. And we're going to convene that morning on the 6th at the Lyric Center at 900 Turpin Street. And that's located right here. And that's part of the VCU complex. And Google Maps says it's about a 9-minute walk. And I do want to thank Matt Scott and Lindsay Abeda, who found this venue for us. And I think it's going to be a good location for us. So the meeting is going to start at about 8 o'clock, and we're going to have a continental breakfast. It's going to be a BYOB. So if you would like your coffee, your tea, or juice, or water, or whatever, you want to bring that with you. I will say there's a Starbucks in the Lyric Center, so that might be able to provide that. So we'll have the breakfast and also some advocacy training. I will go over the talking points for the meetings. We'll show the roster of who's attending what meetings and their locations. Also, we'll go through the documents that are going to be in the leave behind packets. Now, some of the meetings I've seen from the schedule start at 9 o'clock or even one at 8:50. So you may have to leave earlier than the 9 a.m. I will try to have all the information out by 8:20 and the latest 8:30. And then meetings will occur between 9 to 12 o'clock at the General Assembly building. And we'll reconvene back at the Lyric Center at noon for lunch, again, BYOB. A debrief, some people can describe how their meetings went. We'll have some special presentations for our VCCA awards, and we're also going to have a speaker. And I'm really excited that our speaker is going to be Gerald McCarthy, and he just recently wrote this book, Blueprint for Going Green, and he had a very significant role in the development of environmental organizations in Virginia, because he was the founding executive director of the Virginia Environmental Endowment and was in that position from 1977 to 2013. And the groups that he worked with are ones we've all heard about. The Southern Environmental Law Center, Virginia Conservation Network, etc. Just about every environmental group that we have heard about or have worked with, the endowment had some role in helping them get started. So this is going to be a very informative presentation. So now just a couple minutes on just some basic issues about the General Assembly, the legislative process, and how to hold an effective meeting. Now this chart is after the most recent General Assembly election, which was in November 2023. We have the same mix of legislators. In the Senate, 21 Democrats and 19 Republicans. And the House, 51 Democrats and 49 Republicans. So it's still pretty much a razor-thin margin. One or two votes can really decide what's going to happen with a bill or any other issue. And just along those lines, as everybody probably is aware, we will be having another Virginia General Assembly election this year. And as well, the governor's office will be up for election. So our next General Assembly may have a different mix of legislators, as well as occupant in the governor's mansion. So the calendar for this year's General Assembly, legislation was actually could initially be filed as early as July of last year. The session convened on the 8th of January. I put an asterisk there because I think everybody's aware that there was a water emergency in Richmond. So that day, that Wednesday, I believe it was, maybe a Tuesday, they gavelled in the General Assembly, a few people, and then they gavelled it out and reconvened the following Monday. So the 13th was the end of filing legislation. And we referenced earlier crossover, and that'll be on February 4th. So this is 2 days before our advocacy day. So like I had said, the bills that we currently are identifying may not still be in play, and I will have to go ahead and make adjustments if indeed we lose some of those, because each chamber has to complete its business relative to a particular bill by the 4th, meaning voting it up or down, and then that will go to the other chamber. And when it does, it goes back into the same process. Each chamber will assign it to a committee. The committee will make its own analysis and make a decision and hand it over to that chamber for a vote. If there's a bill in both houses that's similar but not identical, they will have a conference committee to work out the differences and have a uniform bill. And so the session adjourns on the 22nd, and then all the bills that were passed are then sent to the governor's office, and he has about a month to decide whether he's going to sign the bill, that it can become law, that he wants to make amendments to the bill, or he wants to veto the bill. So then the General Assembly reconvenes on April 4th to consider amendments and vetoes, and it takes a significant number of legislators to override a governor's veto. It's a 2/3 vote. And you saw the mix of the General Assembly is almost even between Democrats and Republicans. So the likelihood that a veto would be overridden is fairly remote, although there may be an issue, a bill that everybody feels strong about. And those bills that ultimately are able to sign into law will become effective July 1st. So description of the legislative process: the legislator has his or her own idea or gets an idea from a lobbyist or an advocacy group and sends the draft or the basics of the bill to the Department of Legislative Services, who drafts it into legal language, and that particular legislator becomes a chief patron. And then in the respective chambers, in the speaker, in the House, the speaker decides which committee the bill will go to. In the Senate, there's a clerk who makes that determination. The committee will hold a public hearing, and then we'll vote on action for the bill. And I'll show you the various decisions they can make. It goes to the chamber where every member votes on it, and then at crossover, the bill is sent to the opposite chamber, and the committee process starts all over again. And then this describes what happens when the bills that have been passed go to the governor's desk. So opportunities for providing advocacy or input for legislation is to actually give the idea to a lawmaker, ask for a bill by request, or write it out, make a draft of it and provide that to them, and then to follow the legislation. And then the second opportunity is when the bill's in committee, because you can send a message to the speaker, committee members, especially if you're the constituent of somebody who's one of the committee members. You can go to the hearing and actually give testimony at the hearing. Actions by the committees. If you're supporting a bill, green is good. So if you see this phrase relative to the bill, that means it's moving on. These phrases mean the bill hasn't gotten out of committee. And I think I showed you one with relative to noise standards for data centers. When you're meeting with your legislators, just some suggestions in terms of what to do and what not to do. Tell them why you care about this issue. Certainly identify yourself as a constituent, because that will have greater weight. Provide handouts, which we will be doing with our Leave Behind packet. If you have the time, telling a personal story. If you're in the healthcare field and you want to talk about somebody who's having a problem with respiratory conditions and why you're worried about data centers, if identified a particular patient, what you had to do for them, I think that'll carry some weight. And it's not unreasonable to give them a hard ask. Do you think delegate so-and-so will vote in favor of this particular bill, or do you think they will vote against this bill that we don't like? Don't get in awe of the delegate. Don't get into a debate. If you find the legislator or their staff feel differently about this issue, not the time to have a knockdown drag up. Just state the facts and why you're in favor of this. And just some other suggestions here. Know your target audience, do research beforehand. So it's nice to know, as we're talking about legislation, if your delegate or senator have had a hand in this at any point, like the committee or actually crafting it. This goes along to us identifying ourselves as being in the healthcare field, and especially if you're a constituent. Don't assume they know everything about it. So have a statement or two that explains it. We talked about these two. We are going to give you the leave behind packets. And if they ask you a question and you don't know the answer to it, don't be afraid to say that, because this is a great chance for follow-up. You know, I say, well, let me get back to you on that. And that goes down to this point, follow up and build the relationship. Along with that, I will be suggesting or recommending that the lead person in the meeting, typically the VCCA member who is a constituent, should send a thank you message after the meeting. That would be the same time you might send some information. And in past presentations, I've shown the Legislative Information System page. It's changed, it looks a little bit different this year, but this is how you would be able to find out what the status of a bill is in terms of the text of the bill, who the patron is, etc. And I just put one in here that we're supporting. And this was Senator Hashmi's heat protection for workers. And you can see the summary of the bill. You can see that she's the chief patron. If you want to look at the actual text of the bill, there's a PDF link here. And then going down here will show what is happening to the bill so far. And this one says it's been reported from Commerce and Labor with amendments and was sent to a Finance Appropriations Committee. So just some additional items here that I want to share with you and ask for your action. If you've not yet reported a meeting with a legislator that you've scheduled, please do so by sending an email to Sue Nussbaum. You see your email address here. Sue is tracking every legislator meeting and will be putting together the groups that are going to meet with each legislator. So it's important that she know about your meetings. And for those of you who are going to be in Richmond the evening before, some of us are going to be getting together just for an informal, no-host dinner at a restaurant called Patio Thai. If you would like to join us, let Cindy Watts know. And this is her email. Cindy is keeping track of the number of attendees and will be working with the restaurant to make sure that we have enough space or not too much space. So do let Cindy know if you want to be part of this dinner get-together, which will be at 6:30 p.m. at this restaurant. And a couple things here relative to transportation. I think it was Joel Temme on our advocacy committee who identified that you can use Amtrak if you want to get to Richmond. And this shows the Main Street station right here that services downtown Richmond, which is a short distance from the Lyric Center. So if you're an early bird and will take the early Amtrak to get down there, this is, what does it say, an 8-minute car ride or 1 mile to get to the Lyric Center. And I understand by discussing with, I think, Matt, as well as the person at the Lyric Center, that parking at the Lyric Center is very limited to non-existent. So this map shows that there's a number of public parking locations along 8th Street and then just off of this 7th Street right here. So if you're going to be driving to the Lyric Center that morning, look for public parking in close proximity. Again, there won't be any at the Lyric Center. So just a couple of links here. Here's my link should you have any questions after our presentation today. Ryan has been very helpful in helping us get things together. Also, I want to do a shout out to the Advocacy Committee. They've been very involved in helping us get set up. And if you do want to use the Virginia legislative system, information system to follow bills, this is their link. So thank you for listening, and I'm happy to entertain any questions. I'm going to go out of sharing. And like I said, you can raise your hand or take yourself off of mute, however you'd like to do that. Then go to gallery. I don't see any. Oh, there we go. Brianna.
Hi, thank you for your presentation, sir. I wanted to ask about possibly getting into like a debate when you're talking to the legislators. How do you sort of like respectfully disengage yourself if you feel like it is turning into a little bit of a debate with the people you're talking with?
Sure. No, that's a good question. First of all, I'll say that the meetings that I've set up, I've been told, will be 15 minutes. So there probably won't be a lot of time spent in terms of discussing a particular issue. We certainly want to hear from the legislator or their aide. This is going to be awkward, though, if they decide they want to tell you why they think this is a bad idea. I think it's reasonable to say, well, I respect your opinion. This is our position, and we feel it's important to protect Virginians' health from climate change. After that, I'm not sure. Now, I was thinking about this, if this question came up, and there's a couple of examples that we've had from past advocacy days where this provided an opportunity to set up a much longer meeting later. One of our members from the Roanoke area was meeting with her delegate, and he had made the comment about, what's all this stuff about climate change? I don't really know anything about that. Now, he wasn't anyone who was particularly supportive of legislation, but she used that as an opportunity to meet with him outside of the General Assembly, I think at his local office, and went to the meeting with a climate scientist. And even though they'd had an hour, the meeting lasted for 2 hours. So then they had an opportunity to really discuss it and try to educate this legislator. I'm not sure this has been successful given his position on some legislation since then, but that was just an example of being able to expand the conversation. But Brianna, you raise a good point. You don't want to get into a point and counterpoint or a knockdown drag out, because sometimes that will allow it to get emotional. You probably don't want to insult somebody and say, well, these are the facts, and if you knew what you were talking about, you don't want to do anything like that. Now, Brianna, are you one of the students?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You should be attending with a VCCA member, and hopefully that member has got some experience with meeting with legislators previously. So I think you could possibly defer to that person to help guide the conversation. They should understand better in terms of how to recognize that this legislator has an opinion or whatever, or position, and say, well, I respect that you feel differently, but this is how we see this issue, and that's why we're asking for support. Okay?
Awesome. Thank you.
Sure. Anyone else? Kevin?
Yes. Hi, Bob. I just wanted to suggest, if it's possible, to just put those contact emails for yourself, Sue and Adam, in the chat, or just show them somehow.
Oh, sure.
And just to mention that There's no Amtrak from Northern Virginia. I don't know if there's an Amtrak from anywhere that gets there at 7 in the morning or whatever.
Ooh. Well, thank you for that information. I did not confirm that. So I'll say what I was hearing. So I apologize. And Kevin, thank you for that. And Ryan Adams, will we be distributing the slides?
Yes.
Okay. Kevin, would that be okay? We're going to send the slides out to everybody. And that should have the email addresses right there. Kevin, would that work for you?
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Okay, very good. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. If we don't have any other questions, Ryan, if you want to stay on for a second, we'll kind of do a wrap up among ourselves.
Yeah, sure.
I look forward to seeing everybody in Richmond next Thursday. I think you'll have a fun time with this. And I think the weather's supposed to be better. When I looked ahead, it's like low 50s. So it might be a little bit of rain, but certainly not a lot of snow. So I look forward to seeing everybody there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
All right, that was great workout.
Okay. I guess I covered everything because there were very few questions. So like I said, Ryan, I'll go ahead and send out another message Monday, just an
Okay.
email to participants.
Yep.
So I'll be looking for the updated list of attendees.
Yeah.
Probably over the weekend.
Okay.
And we'll see if we need to increase the number of lunches.
Right.
Can you think of anything that we haven't touched base on as we approach Advocacy Day?
Nothing much. I mean, I think everything's good to go. You know, I've got the materials to print out this week. That's the main
Yeah.
thing. And, you know, we just have to show up.
Something that I was going to ask that you or one of the fellows, or maybe Abigail's daughter does, is go to the list of attendees and see who's identified that they want a vegan meal
Right.
and put at least their last name on the lunchbox. Because even though I've ordered, I think 15, and we might have 10 people, if they're just sitting there and aren't identified, there may be people who go ahead and want a vegan meal, even though they hadn't ordered it. And then the people who specifically requested that may not have one.
Right.
So
Okay.
if we could put a name on there, and we could mention that when we start the lunchtime.
Okay. Great. Right. It's pretty much it. And then I just need to pick up the stickers from John. And that's pretty much the last part, you know, for the folders.
Okay. And I will send you the talking points
Okay.
prior to Monday. So you can print those off. And it's probably going to be a one pager, maybe a front and back, given everything that's being covered.
Okay.
And if it continues, if we start losing other pieces of legislation,
Right.
it may not take a lot of space.
Exactly. Yeah. We'll see.
And I'll have to look for maybe some fallback if we lose too much. You know, we had talked about maybe microplastics as an issue.
That'd be
And
a
I'm
good.
not sure where that is right now in terms of the bottle bill and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
that could be a fallback topic if we have to.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Ryan, thank you very much for your assistance today and
Oh,
for all
anytime.
along.
Yeah.
Really
Great job.
appreciated that.
You made it work.
Okay. Okay, you take care.
You too.